My name is Rick Tate. I'm the operations manager for the Senator's office at Huntsville. I'd like to welcome you all here tonight. We're going to start off by doing the pledge of allegiance for the ROTC with
Attention, salute, pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Hush. Right. Hey. Forward. March.
we can be seated. I'd like to call on Dr. Campbell now to come up and he's going to give you a little bit and then you say.
So we're very honored that he's here with us, Judge, to have this session on our campus. Senator Jones is definitely one of those local that's so good. He was born in Fairfield, Alabama. His father worked at U.S. Steel, and his mother was a homemaker. He graduated from the University of Alabama and the Cumberland School of Law at Stanford University. After college, he worked as a congressional staffer for Senator Hal Heflin, and later was appointed federal prosecutor. After serving as a federal prosecutor, he worked a number of years at his own law firm, and then he was appointed by President Bill Clinton as U.S. Attorney General for the Northern District. Senator Jones' most prominent cases were the successful prosecution of two Ku Klux Klan members for the 1963 Birmingham church bombing that killed 4 African-American girls. And he also indicted the domestic terrorist Eric Rudolph as well. And incidentally, if you don't know about it, Senator Jones is the author of a book on the church bombing and his role in the prosecution of the Klansmen. The book is entitled Bending for Justice. It's a fantastic book. A lot of history about Birmingham and labor in Birmingham, race relations. It's a great book. Mr. Jones returned to private practice at the conclusion of President Clinton's term in office in 2001. And then, as you know, he ran for the U.S. Senate as a Democrat in the 2017 special election following the resignation of Republican incumbent Jeff Sessions. Sessions resigned to become U.S. Attorney General, as you know. Mr. Jones won the special election, defeating Judge Roy Moore. In the Senate, he serves on the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, and the Special Committee on Aging. So you can see he has his hands full there in the Senate, in addition to all his other duties. He's married to the former Louise New, and they have 3 children, and he and his family members of the Canterbury Methodist Church in Mountain Grove. And again, it's a pure honor to having Senator Jones with us. I certainly admire his career, particularly what he did with civil rights issues there in Birmingham and the prosecution of those cases there. Justice there, a long time coming, and he made sure that it happened. So, welcome, Senator Jones, to our campus.
Can y'all hear me okay with this mic? Is it okay? We got this a little bit. Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming out here tonight. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the introduction, Dr. Campbell. Thank you for allowing us to come here. It's a beautiful facility, a beautiful campus. And I really appreciate this opportunity. I think we're doing a great job here. We have been trying to do as much as we can for the 2-year college system around the state. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I might have some questions. We'll do some things. But it has been a crazy time for me in the last few weeks. We got out of session on Thursday, August 1st. I say we went out of session. They call it the August recess. But, you know, I see some folks in here that's probably about my age. When I was in school, we used to call recess play period. But it ain't been play period, folks. We've been traveling all over the state. We've been doing a lot of different things. This is probably my 5th or 6th town hall that we've done to try to talk to folks when I try to get around. The one thing I will tell you I did, and I'm so happy I was able to get away. Last week, my wife and I took our 6 and 7-year-old granddaughters to Disney World for a couple of days, which was a lot of fun, but I will tell you, I'm still having kind of, post-traumatic stress disorder from that. And so if at some point I tell you to please sit down and quit fighting, you'll understand that's part of me. So what I want to do today is just talk a little bit about it. But my main purpose in coming and doing these town halls is not to let you, I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing and where I am on some things, but the main thing is to hear from you. Because this is as much a listening session, and I get as much out of your questions as I do if you just want to stand up and make some comments. And we have both. And you should feel free to, anything goes. I've got a couple of topics I'm going to talk about, but at the same time, at any time after that, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to talk, ask questions, do whatever. I see an old buddy of mine that I got to say hello to, Randall Cole over there. One of the state of Alabama's greatest judges ever, and I really mean that. It's great to see. I'm honored that you're here tonight, and I appreciate that. And I promise you, I'll do everything I can, except if you have questions, I'm not sure we'll answer them in public. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about first, and we'll roll through a few things, and then we'll get to Q&A or just statements or however you want to do it. I want to talk about a couple of things I'm doing. First of all, I swore in. First of all, thank you. I know there's a lot of people in this room that helped me in 2017, and I really do appreciate that. This has been an exciting time for me and for my family. I am absolutely honored to be where I am. You just cannot imagine. On January the 3rd of 2018, when I walked onto the floor of the United States Senate, having walked off of that floor as a 25-year-old kid with my old boss, Howell Heflin, and to walk back on being escorted by the former Vice President of the United States, and being a part of that is just an honor that I just can't begin to tell you how much it means to me. And I think about it every day. Every day when I get up, I go to my office and I go to that floor. It's the same kind of rush. I really am honored to be there. And it's an exciting time. It's an interesting time to be in the Senate. The Senate is a far different place than it was than when I worked for Howell Heflin. We don't do the same kind of regular order. We don't have the same kind of deliberations that the Senate did back in the 1970s and 1980s. It's not that you don't hear these great debates on the Senate floor anymore like you saw back in those days. We hear speeches because we have a different thing Senator McConnell runs the show a lot differently. And so we don't have those debates anymore. But we do a lot of work behind the scenes. We do a lot of work in committees. And we do a lot of more bipartisan work. And I'll talk about one of those in a minute to give you an example. A lot more than people really realize. I was lucky enough to be assigned 3 really good committees for the state of Alabama. I'm on the banking committee, banking and housing, and that is an important committee for this state. We were able last year to get some reforms done for banking, kind of tweaking the Dodd-Frank rules to allow our community banks, our credit unions, a little bit of regulatory relief that has been overburdened them. So a really good bipartisan bill that passed the Senate. We're working on some housing issues this year. We want to make sure we protect the 30-year mortgage. We want to get Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae out of receivership so that they can back up those 30-year mortgages and we can get that housing going. That's tough. I'm working on some money laundering issues because that's my old wheelhouse as a former prosecutor. I'm also on the Health Committee, Health, Education, Labor, Pensions. That is a very important committee for me in particular. Education is always a big deal for us, and we'll talk about a little bit of the things that we're doing. We hope to reauthorize the Higher Education Act, which will extend Pell Grants. We're trying to do second chance Pell Grants. And I've also got a bill pending with Senator Alexander, who's the chairman of that committee, to simplify the FAFSA form. Anybody have to fill out a FAFSA form for help their kids? It's awful. It is like doing the tax returns for Apple computer. It is that bad. So we are trying to simplify that, do some things in that committee. We've got a bill pending right now that I believe will help reduce healthcare costs. And I'm going to talk about healthcare in just a second, a little bit more. And the last one I'm on, last year when I was on first got up there, I was on the Homeland Security Committee. But this year I moved over to Armed Services, which is an extremely important committee, not only for the country, but for the state of Alabama. It's important for the country because it is the committee that authorizes all of our military equipment and sets the tone for the appropriations process for the Defense Department. And that has been an eye-opening experience for me. It's just been really amazing because we started in that committee in January with hearings that were both public hearings like this as well as classified hearings. And the way our military in the world today kind of has modernized in the way they command, they've got the world divided into commands and different generals that command each one of those, whether it's the Pacific or Indochina, Europe, the Americas, and Stratcom, space, all of those issues. And so those commanders would come in, they would give us what's known as their posture hearings, which would tell us where they are, what they were doing, and what they needed. Then we'd have a classified briefing on that. Some of those briefings, I got to be honest with you, were ones that I wanted to come back and hide under my desk. But it was really an eye-opening experience for us, and it taught me an awful lot. I mean, as somebody who grew up with a dad who was in the Navy and family members and wanting a strong military, we've got to do a lot to modernize our military and our national defense. A strong national defense is something that is so important. And it's important to the country, but it's also important in Alabama. Alabama does a lot for our nation's security. You guys would be absolutely amazed. I know there's a lot of people in this area that work over in Huntsville, but between Huntsville and the Anniston Army Depot, or the depot, you've got Birmingham, you've got the 117th Air Refueling that does, the guard that flies over the world while refueling the folks. You've got Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery. You've got Fort Rucker down there in Dothan. And you've got also building ships for the Navy in Mobile. It's stunning. And it also helps Alabama's economy. I mean, it is a strong part of our economy. We get in terms of federal dollars coming in for military, we're about 9 out of the 50 states, which is pretty good. So I'm really glad to be on there, and I want to focus a little bit on that first, and then we'll go to another issue. But let's go to 24, Bo. Because, and I'm going to do a few of these, and I'm not going to use these all the time, but I've got a whole bunch of them, and hopefully we can go through a few of these things. Sometimes we'll talk with them and sometimes out. But recently we went through our National Defense Authorization process. It's called the NDAA. We passed that bill in the House and the Senate right before we went out of session. It provided for $750 billion worth of new equipment modernizing our military. It's a step toward modernizing the military, which I will tell you folks, is a lot of money. But we're going to have to start putting money in our military if we want to have a strong defense that I know all of you want. We've got to start modernizing. We're flying planes that are getting older. We've got nuclear missiles that are getting older. We've got to modernize our what they call the nuclear triad with the land, sea, and air-based missile systems because they're all getting older. And I will tell you, China and Russia have been investing a lot of money in the last few years. China especially has been trying to play catch-up because they haven't done it. So we've been doing, this is what we're trying to do. But one of my emphasis has also been on families. Because it's easy sometimes for us to talk about, research and development, hypersonics, vertical lift, the hardware, the ships, the planes, the submarines, the missiles. But at the core of our national security is our people. So one of the things that I really focused on was the people in Alabama and elsewhere that serve in our military, that serve each of you and to serve me. So one of the things we did, we secured a 3.1% pay raise for our veterans. It's the largest one in a decade. And you can imagine, it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you hadn't had a raise in 10 years, it's pretty good. The second thing that we did, we want to talk about spouses. Oftentimes, military folks, they transfer so much. Spouses who have professional certifications can't get those transferred. So we've got some money there to help with military families move and give their spouses the opportunity to get those certifications as they move forward. That's a much bigger deal than people think about. And then support for children. The children I don't know how many here was a military brat, but that's tough on kids sometimes, changing schools all the time, especially tough on athletes when you're trying to go to a new school. So we've got $40 million that we've added to impact aids, and it's will go to the school system, local school systems that are serving military families. $10 million specifically for children who may have disabilities. Just trying to make sure that they are supported the way they should be. Clearly, there are things in industry jobs in Alabama that we wanted to support, which we did. We secured $249 million for the Striker upgrades, $100 million in additional funding for hypersonic weapons. That is the new thing. China is really working hard on that, and hypersonic missiles is something that we got to get in front of real soon. $75 million for the Army's future vertical lift helicopter. Those things are absolutely stunning if you ever get a chance to see one. Upgrades to the Austin-built plants down there and their ships. $15 million for a STEM education program. Those are all things that directly affect Alabama that we were able to try to pull in there. That money is going to companies that are doing business right in Alabama, either in Huntsville or in other places around the state. The other big thing, obviously, as we're modernizing our system, we've got a whole new frontier for potential warfare these days in that space. And it's not Star Wars necessarily. It's not, Luke Skywalker and Han Solo up there duking it out with lasers. But communications, satellite, protection of satellites, using satellites as weapons back to the United States. So the president had proposed this, it's been in the works for a while. He proposed it a little over a year ago. And I think that the final NDAA bill, I know the one in the Senate and the House have a little bit different versions. We're going to make Space Command and Space Force a reality. We've just got to do that. Ultimately, the commander of the Space Command and Space Force will be part of the Air Force, but they will have, ultimately, I believe, their own seat at the Joint Chiefs table at the Pentagon. Right now, Redstone is still in the running for that. They're not sure if they will make it or not. Colorado may have a leg up on that. I hope not, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. The one thing that we haven't put in our NDAA, it's in the House. That this is my personal pet project that we're working on, and I hope I can get it across the finish line. It's something called eliminating the armed military widows tax. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, but it's a really big deal for military surviving spouses. The way things have been for about 40 years, since the 70s, surviving spouses of military members who die as a result of a service-related injury or death are really getting messed up. They're really getting messed up. They're not getting all that they're due. There's a statutory that the VA has a pot of money that by law they go get to these military families, these spouses, surviving spouses, and it goes to them regardless. But so many buy extra insurance, so to speak. They pay out of their own pocket. These veterans, as part of their estate planning, will pay out of their own pocket to get more insurance money, more of a monthly stipend coming into their families. And what's been happening since the 1970s, the Department of Defense and the VA have been pulling these together and in fact subtracting one from the other. And so these military families are not getting but about 55% or so. I don't know the exact figure, but they're losing a lot of money that they paid for over the years. And in a very partisan atmosphere in Washington and around the country these days, Senator Collins from Maine and I are the lead sponsors, and I have been the one that has been really pushing this in the Senate. We've got 75 co-sponsors of this bill to eliminate the widow's tax. 75. That's 3/4 of the United States Senate, which is pretty unheard of these days, to eliminate that. And we're hoping that we can get that. This is just to show you. I couldn't believe this. I found out about this from a widow from Mobile this past year. She came out and told me. I didn't believe her at first. I said, but the United States government's not doing that to veterans. We can't be doing that. And they said, oh, yes, sir, look it out. And sure enough, you can see how the benefits that's the amount that gets lost every year. $1,000 a month or $1,200 a month may not sound like a lot to a lot of people, but some of these surviving spouses, it's a heck of a lot. And so I am really hopeful. I've been talking to House leadership, Senate leadership. We had 65 of our senators who signed a letter to the leadership of both the House and the Senate saying, please put this in the NDAA. It will cost some money. Look, let's be candid. It will cost you some money. I say to you, it's your money. But doggone it is money that we owe these veterans. It is money that we owe. We cannot afford not to live up to our full obligations to these families. And so I'm hoping that will pass. But that's all that we did when we go back. They've been working on that conference bill pretty hard. And we're hoping that we're going to get that done sometime by the middle of September. That will just be authorizations. It's not the appropriations process. Senator Shelby's chairman of appropriations. He and Senator Leahy are working on that. Likely to see, even though we had a budget deal that came up that we all passed, both the House and the Senate right before we left, they've still got to actually appropriate money. And that's going to take a little bit of time. That's when all the politics get involved. And we just got to work through that. But I will tell you in all candor, you should be really proud of the way Senator Shelby handles this with Senator Leahy. They are, Senator Shelby has been there since 1986. Senator Leahy since 1976. He's the Dean of the Senate. And they know how to get things done. I tell people all the time that they just let Shelby and Leahy get in the room by themselves and talk this through, we can fund the government without any problem. And I mean that. They are really good. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I want to talk a little bit about health care. Real quick, let's go to Bo, and I'll just go through slides starting with number 2. I want to talk about health care because that's been a real priority of mine, working on the health committee. Because Alabama is an unhealthy state. We're a poor state, we're an unhealthy state. And there are so many people in this state that do not have proper health care. Even after the Affordable Care Act was passed, our state refused to expand Medicaid, so we still have a lot of people that don't have health care. So if you look here, this found that Alabama to be the 48th least healthy state in the country, only behind Mississippi and Louisiana. Our biggest concerns, no surprise to anybody, I believe, obesity, cardiovascular death, and of course mental health issues that we have. We have a lack of mental health providers here. So we've been doing a few things. Rural hospitals have been a focus of ours because so many hospitals are closing. We've lost 13 hospitals in the last 7 or 8 years. Actually, since 6, I think there's been 7 of them. 7 in rural areas closed since 2011. Now think about that. Think about what would happen up here if you lost your hospital. You couldn't really survive. You could not. A community has a hard time surviving. You certainly can't attract new jobs and new industry. Your education system is going to start to go if they don't have good health care. And so we've been really focused. Hospitals that have been faring the worst. This is look, and I got all the stuff. I don't have it on the slide, but I got all the sources for all this. So I'm not just making this stuff up or giving a political speech. Hospitals that have fared the worst over the last decade have been the ones that refused to expand Medicaid. That accounts for 77 of the 106 hospital closures over the past decade have come from in states that have not expanded Medicaid. Then there's 700 hospitals in rural America that are on shaky ground, including about 90 in Alabama that are close. The margins are so thin. I put these slides, this came from the Alabama Department of Public Health, because the key to me for health care is mamas and babies. That is the real key, because that keeps a community strong. This map on the left talks about how many, we've got 54 rural counties in Alabama. Out of our 67, 54 are considered rural. This is a map from 1980, and these counties right here that are not shaded are the only counties that didn't have an OBGYN delivery service in their county in 1980. Look at the map on the right. That's the number of counties today that do not have those delivery services. Now, candidly, not every county has to be able to deliver a baby, but we've got to make sure we get proper health care for those moms and those kids that are there. So we're trying to do a number of things. We have focused a lot. But this is from the Alabama Department of Public Health, folks. And we talk about investing in Alabama. We need to be talking about investing in Alabamians a little bit, some too, because that is just a stunning photograph to me. So we've been doing a lot of things, and we've been looking at a lot of statistics, focusing on mamas and babies, particularly maternal health, and those in the underserved communities. And if you look at this, again, this is from an AL.com article. Black women run the risk of death from pregnancy-related causes that are 3 to 4 times higher than those of white women. And you know where the black belt is. You know where those concentrations are. They have been losing those hospitals. They're 2 times more likely to suffer from a life-threatening pregnancy complication. Just unconscionable. Maternal mortality rates have doubled since the 1980s. They're growing to 17 deaths for every 100 births in 2015. You can see all the statistics. The racial disparities have become less pronounced, but black women still fare far worse in this country than white women. So see, this is some of the things that we are doing. I have been trying to focus a lot on maternal issues because I think it is the key to healthcare in Alabama in general. We've got the MAMA Act. The MAMA Act's going to expand Medicaid a little bit. By that I mean Alabama's pretty restrictive on Medicaid, but under federal law, a pregnant woman that may be not eligible for Medicaid because their income level is at one level may be eligible at a greatly reduced increase. It's more. In other words, you're eligible with a higher income than normal Medicaid. But those eligibility for Medicaid, those benefits only apply for 60 days after a birth. 60 days. Now, I will tell you, I would be the first to admit, it should come as no surprise, I've never given birth to a child. I do have 3 children, and I have witnessed 3 childbirths. And I've also witnessed what all goes on after that. Even for healthy moms and healthy babies, it's still a tough time. And so what the MAMA Act will do will allow Medicaid to pay those benefits for a full year, to give those moms and babies an opportunity to have the same health care that they had when they were going through the labor, the delivery, and for 60 days thereafter. I think that would be a huge deal for the state of Alabama. We've got the Maternal Care Act that allocates $125 million to identify high-risk pregnancies and provide moms with resources they need. I like to think that we can do some things with telemedicine. I was in Monroe recently, and the Department of Public Health has some monitors that they have put out, these carts with dual monitors, and they've got a program at the health center in Monroe where high-risk pregnant moms can come in to that Monroe Health Center, and they can get hooked up for an ultrasound, and it will go, and they can see that on the screen, and they can also on the second screen talk to a doctor at the University of South Alabama that's seeing them and seeing all of the stats that are coming across with that baby. It's remarkable. We got to do more things like that. And so that the Maternal Care Act is going to do things like that, as well as look at and study some of the racial disparities. The Healthy Mom Act is going to make it easier for pregnant women to get health insurance. Under a lot of health insurance, you can get health insurance if you don't have it, if you have a qualifying life event. Pregnancy does not qualify as a qualifying life event. So we're going to try to make that one so that if a woman does not have health insurance, can afford health insurance, and she gets pregnant, she can get that health insurance by making it that. The Maternal Health Accountability Act was signed last year by the President. It really is creating a grant program for states to establish to review maternal mortality. Not real good data out there. Alabama has finally started getting into that process. And now I've got a bill pending right now. It's called the Rural Moms Act that would provide additional training for medical professionals and work to end rural disparities for maternal health. All of those things I think are important because there are so many issues that we have to deal with in our rural areas, and because, quite frankly, we have not done a real good job with mamas and babies. Alabama still ranks some of the highest in infant mortality. We are always in the top 1, 2, or 3 in the United States for infant mortality. And I will show you this because you can see those blue states with the highest infant mortality and look at the states that did not expand Medicaid, and you'll see a lot of overlap in those states. And we got to, there's a connection to all this, folks. And so I have been really, pounding the pavement about Medicaid expansion. I don't get a vote on Medicaid expansion. That's the state of Alabama's call, but I've been working it because I think it would be important. It would give 326,000 people in this state additional coverage. We would receive $2 billion in federal funds. $2 billion in federal funds. The evidence is clear. It prevents hospitals from closing. It gets better health outcomes, and it helps the economy. That's the evidence, the clear evidence these days about Medicaid expansion. So we've decided to do some things to try to incentivize states. I've got states achieving Medicaid expansion. If you remember, under the Affordable Care Act, originally, if the state had expanded Medicaid, then they could have 3 years where the federal government would reimburse for 100%. Wouldn't cost the state a dime. We were too afraid because it was something called Obamacare, and it was politically toxic for our legislature to do it, so they stayed away with it. Now, legitimately, they had a concern about what would happen down the road when they had to start paying it. I get that. I didn't get the political part of it, but I get the financial part of it. Well, we're going to give them another chance. If we get this bill passed, we'll give them another chance. Give them 3 years if they'll expand Medicaid. Let them take that money, invest it, save it, then start stepping up the reimbursement, because guess what? Now they have no excuse. Because if I get this thing done, the evidence is clear that states that expanded Medicaid, their economies have expanded. It hadn't really cost the state that kind of money. So we got that. We got Smart Choices Act that we're trying to do the studies, to do some things, all to try to convince the state to expand Medicaid. Because right now, the Affordable Care Act is under siege. And I will tell you, I think if it happens, it's going to throw chaos in our healthcare world right now. There is a lawsuit pending in Texas, which the state of Alabama is a part of, trying to declare it unconstitutional. And that's not good. We got 166,000 Alabamians that could lose health insurance if that act goes away. We've got the ACA at the time it implemented, nearly 1 in 5 Americans were uninsured, and you can look at the numbers and how that has gone down. They've gone up. These numbers of uninsured have gone up in the last 2 years because, in all candor, and I do honestly will try to stay as non-political in this as I can, but the Trump administration is trying to completely sabotage the ACA. They have taken away funds to advertise. They've done everything in their power to try to do away with the ACA, and you can see the number of uninsured people in this country that's going up, and that's going to affect everybody sooner or later. So, and by the way, if that ACA goes away, we got just under 1 million people in this state that have a pre-existing condition of some type like this. And under the ACA, there's a mandate that you got a pre-existing condition, you can be insured. You got to be insured. Well, if that goes away, I got under 1 million people that could be at risk. Again, this is not the healthiest state in the world, and we need to make sure we're trying to protect our folks. One thing that we did try to do, there's 2 things. Number one, this bill that's pending, we're trying to eliminate surprise billing. Y'all may have seen some commercials. Don't pay attention to them. I really support their position, to be honest with you. I don't know why they're trying to waste all their money in Alabama. But we're trying to increase transparency, we're trying to lower prescription drug costs, which I think is really important that we do. I'm in favor of trying to let Medicare negotiate prescription drug costs. Right now, they're prohibited from doing that. I think that that would be a big deal to do that. That's the increase in cost of prescription drugs. That is as much a part of rising healthcare costs as anything. So the one thing I want to talk about real quick that is not on the slide, the one thing that we have done that I think is going to help big time is we were able to work with Medicare to change what's called the wage index. I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but Medicare reimburses providers in Alabama only about 67 cents on the dollar. We are at the bottom, and we've been at the bottom for a long time, and that formula has been written to basically we stay at the bottom. We can never move out of it. And over the years, our congressional delegation has been asking CMS to change that rule. They've been sending letters and do some things, but this past year, Senator Shelby and Congresswoman Sewell and I decided to take it a step further, and we invited the CMS director over to have a chat. And she came over to Senator Shelby's office, and the three of us sat down with her and explained the devastating impact on that. And lo and behold, she told me when she called to give me the good news that she's changed that. She said, "Thank you for just bringing this to our attention, that we're going to change that." So now, for the next 4 years, Alabama's going to get a higher reimbursement. It's going to help these rural hospitals. But I want to put it in context. Let me make sure you understand. It's a big deal. It's going to bring in $40-something million a year. And the hospital association, the doctors, were just literally dancing in the streets almost about it. But to put it in context with Medicaid, it's going to bring in about $42 or $43 million a year. If we were to expand Medicaid today, we would bring in $3 million a day into the state of Alabama's economy. Now, I got to tell you folks, it is time. I talked about veterans. We invest in Alabama companies, and we should be investing in Alabama companies. We do a lot to evade taxes. We do a lot to kind of keep people here. We don't invest in healthcare. And we need to start investing in the healthcare profession. We need to invest in our healthcare for our people, because we can pull ourselves up if we will only make that investment. So that's a couple things that we're doing. There's so much other things that oh my God. I got to go in there. Little things here. I'm sorry. We've got a lot going. There was one other thing I was going to talk about. Ron, I got to go along with it. We were going to talk about this. Y'all know Ron Sparks? A couple of things. I got a great staff in Washington. I got a great staff here in D.C. And I was prevailed upon Ron. His arm is still sore from where I twisted it about 4 or 5 months ago to come on to help me. He's been helping in Montgomery, but now he's got more of a statewide portfolio, and I'm so happy to have him. You see Rick Tate back in the office. Rick Tate grew up in Saxon, Alabama. So we got you guys covered. Anything that you need up here. But, look, there's a lot of things I can talk for hours and hours. I promise you, I'm a lawyer. But what I'd like to do is just kind of open things up and hear from you, your questions, your comments. There's a lot of things. I know there are a lot of things on your mind. There are, there are guns issues. There's the Mueller report. There's the economy that's going on. I mean, there's tariffs and trade. I've been very vocal about tariffs and trade issues. So everything's open. Everything's wide open. I have no prohibitions on any of this. The only one I said earlier, Judge Cole just knows too much about me for him to stand up and start asking questions. I'm not going to let him. But anybody, so let's just open it up. I don't know if we're going to, yes sir, we'll start with you.
First of all, I want to thank you for not being afraid to have not to be afraid to have an open public meeting and having this time for us. Three questions. One is I hope you read John Archibald's article on caring for veterans after they become veterans.
Right.
The other thing is we've heard a lot about the Mueller report, and we've heard that they proved that Russians were influencing the election. What are we doing about that?
Right.
And the last question is, what can we do about the state Democratic committee that has.
Well, it's been real nice being with y'all tonight, I'll say that.
I know you ran for the office last time.
Yeah, no, let's talk about, hell, I forgot all your questions. What was the first one? Oh, Archibald, yeah, I read it. We're doing a lot on veterans. We're looking at new nursing homes in Alabama. We're trying to figure out the best way to get care for veterans, especially veterans in rural areas, to make sure.
Mental health.
The mental health is huge. And I gotta tell you, my friend, veteran suicide is a huge problem. My friend John Tester from Montana made a statement on the floor the other day that said, that, if we can solve suicide for veterans, we can solve it for America.
Amen.
And so we're working on that. So we got, I read John's columns a lot. So yeah, we're working on those. The second part, we're doing a lot, I think, with regard to the Russians. The Mueller report really laid out the case. And there's a lot more that we've learned, or that I've learned in a classified setting, and it's far worse than what you read just in the Mueller report. It's amazing, and it's not just Russia anymore. Russia wrote the playbook, and now China's been reading that playbook, and North Korea's been reading that playbook, and Iran's been reading that playbook. And it is composed of two different parts, really. One is the interference or potential tampering with elections themselves, the ballots, the electronic voting machines, the ballots, and there's a lot that's been happening about that. There's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of work that Homeland Security has been doing with the states to try to upgrade their election systems. States are taking advantage of that, trying to get paper ballot backups. Alabama has got those paper ballot backups, which helps. So there's a lot going on in that aspect. The harder one is the interference by influencers, and that is the use of social media with the fake Russian bots that are trailing everybody. In my campaign in 2017, toward the end of that election, we were knocking out. We had some of the most sophisticated software going, and we were knocking out 40,000 bots a day that were going after my Twitter or my Instagram. It was stunning, and that is going to continue. And it's the influencers. And if you haven't read Volume 1 of the Mueller report, you really should. That's really the most important part, in my opinion, of the Mueller report, because it really details what they did to try to do with social media. They did the hacking of the DNC, and there's a lot going on, but that's harder to deal with. As an education standpoint, we're also trying to deal with the tech companies. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of these, they've got to step up, and they've got to help monitor this. They can determine who is real and who is not real, somehow, some way. The other thing that I'd like to do, and I think that this is important, there are so many ads, there's so many Facebook ads, there's so many ads that come up on social media these days. They're totally unregulated by the FEC. You don't have to say or do anything. When I put on a TV ad or a radio commercial, I've got to put a disclaimer on it. I've got to say, this is, I'm Doug Jones and I approve this ad. And it shows who paid for it. You don't have to do that on social media at all. So we've got bills pending. Amy Klobuchar and Rob Langford, who's a Republican from Oklahoma, have a bill pending to try to get that in the works. I will tell you, there's a lot going on. I don't think there's enough going on. But there's a lot. We had a classified meeting about briefing on it about a month before we left office, and I will candidly tell you, I felt better going out of it than I did going in. And so, I can't really say a whole lot more. I'll tell you the biggest problem, though. In all candor, the biggest problem is when you hear the president say, oh, this is a hoax. It's a problem because people don't pay attention when that's the case. When the president of the United States sits down on a stool like this and leans over Vladimir Putin and says, please don't interfere with our election. Just an off-the-cuff, something like that, that is just unbelievable to me. And so we've got to tell people on both sides of the aisle, Republican, Democrat, Independent, this is real, it's serious. Pay attention to it as these elections go. Don't take anything for granted when you see it. If there's no disclaimer on it, take it with a grain of salt and try to find something. And if you've got an interest in a candidate and you find something that there's an interest in, go do some other checking on it and come back and see. And that's one way, but we got to get the tech companies engaged. They're stepping up more and more, but we got to keep a handle on them. So, thank you.
What about the state committee?
Oh, dang. I thought I talked long enough where he forgot about that. I think there's changes coming. Look, we got to have changes in the state party. We don't have a state party. I mean, that's the bottom line. We have people who are holding offices, and we have no leadership in the state party. We really have no functioning Democratic Party in Alabama. And I've said for a long time, in order for any state to progress, we've got to have a competitive two-party system. I don't care who wins this time or that time. We've got to have a competitive two-party system. If you look around the country, look at the country as a whole, it is that competition of ideas that makes us run. It's being able to get out and talk about it once you get into a November election, not being able to take votes for granted. And there are changes that are in the works that I think are being made. We have been embarrassed enough in front of the DNC. They have rejected the election of the chair and vice chair. They have rejected our delegate selection. If we're not careful, we're going to get shut out of our nominating convention. I don't think that will happen, but we're on the verge if we don't do something. But there are things going on. And I think if we can get, the main thing that's got to happen is that we've got to get more inclusive. Right now that this has been controlled so tightly, and there's been no outreach to youth or anyone else in the state. So one of the things that's going to be added, I think, is going to be a lot of young people under age 36. And that's going to change the whole dynamic of the state party, and it's going to give us some opportunities that we haven't had in a long time. So to be honest with you, ultimately I'm very optimistic. I'm frustrated it hadn't happened yet. But I'm still optimistic it's going to happen soon because we're going to need it. The state's going to need it. I mean, look what's happened since 2010. The governor had to resign. The Speaker of the House was convicted. The Chief Justice got kicked out of office again for the second time. About half the Republican leadership in the legislature was gone to prison or pleaded guilty to something. I mean, when you control something like this the way that anybody does, it does nothing but breed corruption. And we've got to get this needle back and get competitive. I think we're on the verge of doing that, and I'm working hard to try to make it happen.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, thank you for coming to North Alabama. But my question is, in a conservative state, how do you plan to bridge that gap between the Democrats and Republicans so that it's more united instead of just a constant fight?
Great question. And number one, because we are a pretty tribal state. Number one, I'm not going to talk about it as Republicans and Democrats. I'm going to talk about issues. You heard me talking about it. Is there anything that I've talked about today that shouldn't be an issue that Republicans and Democrats should agree on? Not a thing. You see, I truly believe that we have more in common than we have in divides. I said that during the campaign. I've said it since the election. I've said it over and over again because I truly believe it. And when you see the things I've done, and not everybody is going to agree with me all the time. My wife will tell you that first and foremost. But we're going to talk about issues, and I'm going to talk to I don't talk to Republicans or Democrats. I talk to people. And I try to talk to them, and more importantly, I try to listen to them. And try to understand those concerns, where they're going, what they've got, and try to learn from those. And sometimes we can find common ground, and sometimes we can't. But if we can't, we can agree to disagree without being disagreeable, and we can find common ground on something else. And that's how I think you can bridge that gap. I think that's what Alabama's looking for. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, folks, we really all want the same thing. We want safe schools. We want a safe place to worship and the freedom to do that. We want a strong military. We want to make sure that if we want to go out and hunt a deer, we've got a rifle we can do it with. We want to make sure that we've got good health care no matter where you live. We want to make sure that your kids have a great education no matter which zip code that they live in. Those aren't Republican issues or Democratic issues. They're Alabama issues. And so our focus is going to be on one Alabama for everyone, not just this group or that group or from this part of the state or that part of the state. We're focusing on one Alabama for everyone. And that's where I think we resonate. Because I will guarantee you watch, it's already starting to happen. The other side, all they know is how to divide people. That's all they want to do is talk about divisions. That's all. It's us against them. Well, it's all us as far as I'm concerned. We are all the same. It's all us, and that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to tell you, that's why we're going to win too. Okay. So, okay, I can hear you. Go ahead.
First of all,
So everybody else can hear you.
I think they probably could have heard me as well. But I want to thank you and tell you that I have called 224-2124 so many times to speak to your assistants. And thanking you for doing things, or saying, oh, please help us with
Right.
this. And one thing that we agree on, okay, I think we agree on, is the immigration detention,
Right.
family separation,
Right.
ridiculous, horrible things, right? Well, I was just about to die off until I listened to the rest of your little talk on CNN.
Right.
And you said why you didn't think that the end of ice was good.
Right.
Superb thing, I didn't call it
Okay.
time. However, in Alabama, we have Marcos Baltazar and his son Juan.
Yeah.
Adelante, on board,
Right.
just working, and they're just two examples of the many family members and
Right.
friends that we have, okay, in Birmingham, in Etowah,
Right.
other places. How can you guys help us? What can we do to stop this ridiculous, horrible things going on?
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, it really is, and I'm familiar with that. The office has been, my staff in Birmingham has been really following that a lot and talking to folks, talking to the lawyers as well as the advocates about what's going on. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that particular situation, but there was a Hispanic advocate who was in the country without papers. He came across the border several years ago. He's been an outspoken advocate. He is waiting for a court hearing. As I understand the facts, he is seeking asylum and has been waiting for a court hearing. But unlike what you hear that happens all the time, he's not faded into the sunset. He shows up when he's supposed to show up. He reports in when he's supposed to report in. And he's got a young son that just turned 18, and as I understand it, because that son turned 18, they picked him up, and now they're being held pending that pending that hearing and a determination. I have no idea the validity of his asylum facts. One of the problems that we got on that issue is that we don't have enough judges, immigration judges, to really do this, because there are so many people that have legitimate asylum claims. There's some that do not. So I don't have a judgment on those particular facts. What really bothers me about that is you got somebody who's doing what they're supposed to do, staying within the rules. He didn't come in within the rules. I get that, and I understand that, and that's not good. We are not, because candidly, the problem is, one, that we cannot be for open borders. We can't be for open borders. We've got to know who is coming into this country and how they're coming in. We've got to know that. In this day and age, especially with terrorist activity the way it is, we got to know who's coming into this country. So we got to do a better job at the borders. We got to do a better job of trying to figure out this whole system. That guy, though, was here. He was working. He was reporting in as he was supposed to. It seemed to me, and I just say it seemed to me like there would have been a better use of resources for somebody who was not following the rules. Because there's people out there not following the rules. We've been looking at the Gadsden Detention Facility. That's a tough issue. There's been trying to get money. I think conditions have gotten better there, but they're still not good. The conditions on the border, the one thing that we did on the border on the detention issues, we passed a bill back in the summer that provided just under $5 billion of emergency aid that would help to the facilities, help move things down there, to get more immigration judges, help move things along. I have asked, along with about 3 Democrats and 5 Republicans, we sent a letter to Homeland Security asking that they consider a pilot program to help look and do an initial review from some of the asylum claims that is just really designed to weed out the ones that are not valid. Because there's some coming across that you know are not valid, and you ought to be able to get rid of those pretty quickly and get those folks back where they need to be, and deal with the ones that you've got, which would relieve that burden a little bit. We've got border issues. We can't build a wall. We can't build a 2,000-mile wall. That's just not feasible to do. Right now, it was announced today, I don't know if you know this, but the president's taken, I forget how many $1 billion, $5 billion out of the Defense Department that Congress appropriated. $5 billion of that was going to a maintenance program in Anniston that is not going to get built for a while now because the president wants to put it on the border. There are things that we need to do to better to secure the borders, and there's some things that better with barriers in certain places, but we need better technology. We need better things that we can do. You know what the irony is that if you had passed the bill that I worked on last year, it was a $25 billion bill, we may not be having this problem. I mean, it was a really good bill for border security that was a very bipartisan bill. $25 billion in border security, drones, technology, borders, the whole 9 yards. But the president wanted more that dealt with things other than border security.
If the next kids were gonna pay for it.
Yeah, that's a different issue. The other thing, though, I will tell you my view about one of the immigrations. And let me say this real quick. I do believe the president has been working hard in the right way to try to work with some of these Central American countries to try to help stem the tide, because these people that are coming across are not thousands and thousands and thousands of drug dealers or human traffickers. There are folks in that group like that. But they're people seeking asylum. They're people fleeing a really, really bad situation. These are not people that are coming, that are hiking hundreds and hundreds of miles with little children because they're trying to bring in a few pounds of cocaine. They are really risking their lives to get, and they go to the border. They go to our border and they don't just scoot across and try to get in somewhere. They stop at that border and wait to be arrested. That's what happens to them. And that's why we've got this overcrowdedness. And so one of the things that I think the president's doing a good job of working to try to stem that tide a little bit with the authorities down there. The thing that he hasn't done, though, is withdrawn aid. And I think that that's a real problem. We've got a bill pending that we call the Marshall Plan of Central America. I don't know, there's enough people old enough in here to remember the Marshall Plan for Europe, because we rebuilt the world after World War II. We helped our friends like France and England, but we also helped our enemies, Germany, Japan, because we were the moral leader of the world. We were the economic driver of the world, and we still are, or can be, where it's getting close these days if we're not careful. And so we need to help our neighbors. They really need help with the violence, the drugs, the human trafficking, the gangs that are down there. We need to help them, and we have the ability to do that. So I'd like to see more aid going down there that we can monitor, that we can make sure the funds are being spent properly and they're not being used for corrupt purposes. I think we can do that, and I think that would help, because that's the key. You want to stop the flow of immigrants at their source instead of having to deal with it once they get to the border. Stop them at the source and let them. These people want to stay home. They really want to stay home. So that's that. I think the bill that passed this was a good first step, but we need some bigger immigration practices. So thank you. Yes, sir? Have we got another one over here? Yeah, okay.
First of all, as everybody else has said, thank you so much for coming to North Alabama. I'm a graduate student in seminary, and my wife is 1 year away from her undergraduate in elementary education. Together, we already have $40,000 in debt.
Yeah.
I am currently making $30,000 a year, and she's currently making minimum wage. Do you believe that we should be the ones to pay off that debt over time, or do you believe that the government should help out with that?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways that the government can help. We got a big issue because we don't want to give people incentives to just drive up there. So I am not for the Bernie Sanders plan that would just erase $1 trillion worth of debt. It's too huge. Bo, go to slide 34 for me a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about student debt. Part of the debt is the rising cost of college in general. 34. There we go. You can see here over the years how college tuition has rose in conjunction to the consumer price index. It's stunning. And no one, it's really hard to pinpoint. So reducing student debt is really complicated. We got outstanding student debt right now that's reached $1.6 trillion. And there are 44.7 million Americans with student loan debt. Among the class of 2018, 69% of college students took out loans. They graduated with an average debt of $30,000. So many people have graduated with more. It does a lot of things. I understand the burden. It prevents home ownership. It prevents starting families. It prevents entrepreneurship because you can't invest. You can't do some things. So what can we do to kind of reduce that debt? There's a couple things that are going on. Alabama in particular. Alabama is the 9th among states where debt loads of public college graduates are the highest. Think about that. We don't have that income. We're not anywhere close that we should be that high. But yet we do. I think in part because Alabamians use their credit card. They use debt more than we really should over the years. But we're only 1 in 5 states where the average debt exceeds family income. The debt of student loan exceeds family income. That's just incredible. So what can we do? We're trying to figure out ways to help reduce that. And sometimes it's going to be a combination of public-private partnerships, and sometimes it's going to be apprenticeships. Other times it's going to be with things that we can do with the federal government. We've got programs that will help with loan forgiveness. For instance, I got a plan now, a bill with Senator Young from Indiana called the WIN Act. It's for nurses. I know we got a nursing program here. Right now, you can get some student debt relief for nurses who go into nonprofit hospitals and providers. But we got a nursing shortage. So let's make that for any nurse, even from private, public, private hospitals. Reduce that kind of debt. We've got to look at ways, I believe, that we can partner with some of these companies, corporations, states, locals, education facilities, whether it's teachers or whatever, that can help supplement and help pay off that debt. I don't think you can just forgive all of this debt, but there's ways that I think you can do it. If somebody gets public service, if they're a teacher, you can work with the local officials. That's going to be the way that we reduce this down the road. It is a complicated process. We didn't get into that problem overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. But it is a huge, huge problem. The other thing that I think that we got to do is 2 things. One is, I go back to simplifying the FAFSA form. And so people understand what they're getting and how they're getting it. Because there's a lot of grant money out there too that people don't know they can get. They don't have to pay back. Pell Grants, we want to expand Pell Grants for a lot of folks. The other thing is just transparency. So many colleges and universities around the country are just not as transparent. We do a pretty good job in Alabama, I think, of being pretty transparent on the cost. But what we also need to be looking at is the cost versus what your expected income will be in your chosen field, and whether or not you really want to do that and spend that kind of debt. We've also got a problem in this country because we don't teach financial literacy in this country. I'm not saying that about you, please, but the fact is we don't teach that. People don't understand as much, and we need to start teaching kids and adults a little bit more about financial literacy, what it means to take out that loan, how long that this is going to be on your back, so that there may be some alternatives, and that if you want to go and get a 4-year college degree, you might want to work a little bit before you do that. You might want to come up here at this fine school right now and get a 2-year degree, get out there and work a little bit, then go back and get a 4-year degree. People are young; they got a long time, And so I think it's a complicated problem. We need to start at a young age. We've got to get colleges and universities looking at lowering costs, and we've got to try to figure out ways to make it more transparent so people understand what they're getting into. That doesn't necessarily help you. I wish I could tell you, but good luck. I mean, I'm just telling you, it's a burden, and there will be ways. I think there may be programs coming up down the road where folks can do it, but I just can't. It's going to be hard, I think, for the Congress or for really the public to buy into basically wiping out all the debt and letting everybody else pay because somebody else got into debt. That's a little bit, that's what it is. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir?
Well, first of all, my wife and I moved down to Iowa about 12 years ago, and this is the first time in 12 years we have an opportunity to have an intelligent conversation with a politician. The one thing I do want to talk about was healthcare. That's something close to me. You talk about Alabama being one of the worst states in the country. Well, in reality, this country is one of the worst countries in the civilized world.
Yeah.
And so that puts us really way down.
Yeah.
And, all of these individual issues, the rural hospitals, Medicare expansion, pre-existing conditions, there's one solution to address it all. That's universal, single payer.
Right.
That addresses all of those issues. Money. It replaces Medicaid. You don't need Medicaid. Everybody has insurance. I mean, it's the one solution that will work. And
Yeah, you know, look, I think that there's a lot of people that, clearly a lot of people advocate for that. You know, the one thing that I think that we're looking at closely, or at least that I have been, is not the single payer right now. I just don't know if we can, our deficit is just going crazy, and I'm still not convinced, and I'm not sure I'll be convinced that ultimately that's the way that we need to try to transform. But I do believe this. I do think we can give a public option to this, because I'm not one of these folks. There are a lot of people in this country that like the health insurance that they got with their employer, and they don't want to give it up. Okay, I know, I get it. I understand the arguments on the other side, but the fact is that they're there. And you're going to find a lot of resistance from people that have had that. I mean, I got a lot of resistance from people that don't want to give up their health care coverage with their employer. They don't, even though it's expensive, they don't want to do it. But if we had some form of a public option and see if we can do that, I think that is a way that we can start looking at this and see how we can go. Because then we give people those choices. And that's the key, is the choices. If people have those choices, we can get those choices. I think Medicare is more efficient than a lot of people think it is. I think it's really well done. Medicaid has issues, but it's mainly because the states, set the parameters. We don't do a good job in Alabama on Medicaid, and that's why I wish we could expand Medicaid. But I think a Medicare public option, especially if we're also giving them an opportunity to negotiate with prescription drugs. I think that is a really good place that we can get, because the goal is not necessarily single payer. The goal is universal health coverage for everybody. That's the goal. And I don't think you have to have single payer to get universal health coverage if you can give people public options and give people an option to stay with what they've got. If they like their insurance company, I think that would also put more pressure on insurance companies to do really good things. I'm not a real big fan of insurance companies, to be honest with you. But I think that would put a lot of pressure on them. And so it's not necessarily the answer you want to hear. But, look, this is a debate that I hear every day just about in Washington these days. And it's going to continue. It's going to continue, and it needs to continue, because these debates make sure people start looking at solutions. When you've got this issue and people start talking, that's how you can find a solution. Because when you can find, if everybody knows what they want, we ought to be able to find a way to get there. Okay? All right, so thank you. Yes, ma'am? Then I'll come over here if there's anybody over this way. Okay.
I'll just say thank you again.
Thank you.
I'm a retired nurse practitioner. I spent most of my career in federally funded rural health clinics, which means that many times my patients did not have alternative insurance. So I got very familiar with the $4 list at Walmart.
Right.
Drug prices are just outrageous, and I heard you mention drug prices earlier. With insurance or without insurance, many times we can't afford the medicine that we're prescribed. then my question is, would you commit or to co-sponsor or at least to vote on Sherrod Brown's bill number 377 that would hold drug companies responsible and revoke their patent if they are charging the United States more than other countries and refuse to renegotiate the price?
Yeah, I need to make sure, I may already be, I'm talking to Sherrod about that, I'm looking at that bill, but I like it. Myself for sure, because I think we got to hold them accountable. Am I still on? I think we've got to hold them accountable, and Sherrod is doing a really good job of doing that, and I think that that's a way to do that. And there's some other things that we're doing too to try to hold folks accountable. I think we ought to make these drug companies a little bit more transparent in their prices. I mean, you know, not everybody advertises their prices on television, but most everything is advertised. You know, if you want to buy a car, you can go down to so-and-so, they'll tell you, you know, the cost of these automobiles, they'll tell you the local supermarket, and you get the flyer every day. I think we need to make sure that when all these drug companies are spending a gazillion dollars in advertising, that we understand the cost of those drugs, and we give pharmacists an opportunity also to talk about the generics that might be available, other things in counseling. I like to give pharmacists a little bit more authority to talk to people in ways in which there might be a couple of alternatives that right now they're restricted from doing. Those are things that we're looking at now. We're also looking at getting generics to market faster. You know, making sure that the patents, we stopping the use of the patent extension process. We want to do that. You stand there and I'll fall down. Is it off or on? Is it on in? Back on? Not on? There it is. Okay, all right. Sorry, I'll just yell that. So there's a number of things. I'll look at Sheriff's bill and see. What is it? Is it off?
Yeah, it's off.
Where did it go? Okay. I don't warn my battery down. Okay, so we're looking, but I'll make sure, I'm familiar a little bit with that bill, but I will look and see if there are any other provisions. Sometimes the headline on the bill is one thing, but there may be some other provisions I'm not that crazy about. But what you said, I am in favor of. Okay? So let me take a look at it. Sherrod and I are good friends. I'm supposed to be living in Ohio for a day. So he's a really great senator. So, yes, sir.
My question is about rural broadband.
Yeah, good question.
Asking about rural broadband and how do we make sure that kids and families in rural areas like this don't have to sit in the McDonald's parking lot to get their schoolwork done.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been working on rural broadband. Go to number 69. We've been working on rural broadband since we got there as well. Because it has got to be a priority in Alabama. We've got so many people in the state that are without broadband. I forget the exact numbers, but it's huge. That shows you, it gives you an idea. That's not, you can't really see that as much. But a couple of things that we've been doing. Last year, we put in a lot of money for grant monies for rural broadband, several $100 million into the farm bill that got passed. That's farmers. I can't believe you forgot to talk about farmers. God, you can't get good staff around here. Okay. So we put a bunch of money in the farm bill last year. Susan Collins again, and I have a bill pending right now that will put more money and expand that to give grants and to try to get some incentives to get broadband out there. It is a huge problem. Broadband is the new electricity for folks right now. It is for businesses. It's for education. It's important for our healthcare. That telemedicine I was talking about, if you don't have broadband in those areas, you're not going to be able to get that. So we've been looking at, and I know the state, to the state's credit, they've been trying to figure this out too. And there's some initiatives going on that they can connect universities, businesses to try to help get those spurs out there. It's a serious issue. That has been a pretty bipartisan issue in the Senate. And I'll tell you about something on bipartisanship in a minute. Somebody will give me a leeway about the NDAA. But that's a good, but we're working on it. I mean, there's a lot of things pending, and I believe the bill that Susan and I have pending now will ultimately get rolled into a bigger bill. That's how most of our bills get passed these days. They get rolled into a bigger appropriations bill. So you want to talk about farmers?
I have to read it.
Okay.
First I want to say thank you for being here, and also thank you for being our senator and representing the whole entire state and all its citizens so admirably.
Thank you.
Alabama has historically been a state rich in agriculture, and we're very proud of our hardworking farmers and farm workers. We are already feeling the effects of the trade war with China in various ways and degrees. Some of our farmers have lost Chinese markets for their crops, while others have suffered increases in operating costs and loss of availability of Chinese products. Now, on top of the loss of the foreign markets, this administration has seen fit to waive the ethanol blending regulation for oil refineries. So now our farmers face the loss of a domestic market for approximately 40% of our corn crop. And this is all on top of several years of extreme weather effects on their crops already. Can you expand on this and what steps you can take in Washington, D.C. to mitigate this and protect our farmers?
It's a great question, and that it is something that I know is really important to the state. It's important to this area. But go to 40. And we have been doing a lot for farmers. I've been trying to do a lot. And it's a two-part program right now, especially with the tariff war, trade war, what we've got going on. Biodiesel is in very important right now. We've got a lot of things that we're doing. This administration, and unfortunately, guys, I can't complain just completely about the Trump administration. President Obama did it, President Bush before him, President Clinton before him, President Bush before him. Each administration tends to be governing more and more by executive order. And that's a real problem. And with the polarization that we're getting into now, what we're seeing is this. We're seeing a needle on one side. You can pick right or left. And so whatever you're looking at, so obviously what I'm going to get. But whatever right or left, the next administration comes in and the needle goes back the other way. We can't govern like that. So I would like to see Congress taking back a little bit more authority in a number of things so that we've got a better opportunity when the administration does things like that to roll back those rules, to do those kind of things that will hurt that biodiesel, that we can come back. They're doing it in part because the president doesn't believe that we're in a climate change problem. He thinks that's a hoax. And so his EPA is doing things completely inconsistent with all the studies that the administration is doing. But I'd like to see us looking at issues that where we can roll those back. I can't promise you that we can do it. I'd like to see us do that. Biodiesel's one. The things that we are doing for agriculture in Alabama and elsewhere, though, cotton in particular has been a big one. Last year, we had some real success, or I did, with our farm bill. That was a very bipartisan bill that passed last year in the farm bill. And we had done some things to protect seed cotton that hadn't been done in a long time. We were able to get some things for seed cotton that really, you talk to any cotton farmer around here, we got new cotton gins going up in Alabama because I was able to get something to protect seed cotton that they haven't had done for a few years. And then we included some other things that we would put in there that they would not allow anything in the farm bill to negatively impact cotton producers. That was really big to the cotton producing industry, which is huge here in Alabama. We've been reevaluating critical programs with the Farm Bill. I will tell you, the Farm Bill was such that it was incredibly bipartisan, but our farmers have been hit in a couple of different ways. Soybeans, you mentioned in particular, are losing markets. In 2016, Alabama producers grew 13 million bushels of soybeans, over 400,000 acres. The trade war has hit them hard. Weather has hit them hard. And but the trade bill in particular, the trade war in particular, has hit them hard. So we've have a bill to provide trade adjustment assistance to farmers that have been hurt by the trade war. They fall in a niche. And so we're trying to do everything that we can to help farmers. You know, the president decided he felt bad because he was hurting all the people that supported him in the farming industry. So he decided to prop up soybean farmers for a while with two handouts. And I don't use that term in a negative way. That's what it was. They use it that way. These farmers don't want a bailout. They want their markets. And they're losing those markets. And we sent a letter regarding the second round because the trade war is continuing. That's something different. But let me tell you something. What people don't realize about the farming industry right now in Alabama that we've been working on, and why I have been so adamant about the trade, because the president started announcing new tariffs against China, and let me tell you, I'll be the first to tell you China's a rogue actor. We needed to do something. I agree with the president, quite frankly, that we let them get away with too much for too long. Problem is, now we're going it alone. Because when we started the trade war with China, we also started kicking our friends in Europe in the shins over trade. We started trying to figure out what to do with Mexico and Canada, and we made everybody mad. And now we're going it alone against China instead of having our friends and allies there with us to try to get these guys in line, because the real problem with trade with China is not the amount of goods coming over here. Nobody's complaining about that. The real problem with China was the intellectual property that they were stealing and forcing companies that do business in China to make them give them half the company and give them their trade secrets. Well, there's a way to do that and stop that. But a trade war that we've got, and let me tell you where we are now, we're feeling the heat. Soybean farmers in particular have seen a lot of their prices go through the roof. Where are those slides, though? You know, I took those somewhere. I had them out. I just showed. Oh yeah, look at, start at 45. So right now the president's jumped up. We got 15% more that went into effect this week. Consumers are going to start feeling it. People don't fully appreciate the fact that these tariffs are taxes on us. Okay? We're paying for these. Just like that wall that Mexico didn't pay for, China's not paying for this. On the one hand, the president the other day said, look, we're going to delay some of these tariffs because we want to get through the holiday season, so it's not going to hurt consumers. What you would think is an acknowledgement that he understood that the consumers are paying for. Then 10 days later, he's bragging about $40-something billion coming into the Treasury and how effective they were. That's our money. It's not China's money, and that's our money that's coming in for this. So we've got a problem. Manufacturers from one end of the state to the other are concerned, but the real problem has been with soybean farmers. The escalation of the trade war has, right now, China's retaliated with billions of dollars. It seems that we're just playing chicken. We have no coherent strategy, in my opinion, about this trade issue. We're going it alone, and I guarantee you the European Union is doing things by themselves. China is smart. China is smart. Their economy is not the greatest right now, but they can survive it. They got a lot of people, they survive it. And the fact is, China's put billions of dollars around the world to create the markets that you were talking about. And the problem our soybean farmers have is that they're farming and they're working hard and they've spent years creating those markets in China, and all of a sudden those markets are drying up and they're not going to come back. They're not going to come back. China may buy a little bit of soybeans from us, pursuant to a deal that we might get cut, but at the end of the day, those markets are going to Brazil, or they're going to somewhere else. This trade war has hurt us. It needs to end. It needs to end quickly. That's the soybean prices that you can see. There was the soybean crop when these retaliatory tariffs were announced. It's crazy. It is crazy, and quite frankly, I think the President of the United States has taken a lot of his supporters for granted and said, I know you'll be with me regardless of what I do to you. One of the things that we did to try to help farmers recently is a bill that I hated I had to ever have to file, and that is to give them some relief with bankruptcy. Chapter 12, I think it is bankruptcy. Senator Grassley and I co-led a bill to expand the relief and this bill passed recently. The President signed it. That's a bill I never wanted to have to give to farmers, you know, to give them bankruptcy relief, because there's more and more farmers that are committing suicide, there's more and more farmers going into bankruptcy court. By God, we need to do something about it. And this administration is not doing anything about it. The only thing that I can tell you that I saw recently is where the Secretary of Agriculture from Georgia made a joke about farmers whining, and it didn't go over too well. So I'll get off it. So I said I try not to get political, but I get a little every now and then. So, all right, so I'm getting a secret signal from my Jose Perry, who's head of North Alabama here for me. They're having, automobile tariffs is another whole issue. Threat to automobile issue. You know, good grief. It's just stunning that the president would even begin to argue that a foreign automobile, 57,000 jobs in Alabama depending on foreign automobile makers. You know, that we've got in this state, we've got suppliers. What's different about trade? And I you know, look, I'm not a business major. I majored in political science and history and English. But what I've learned is, you know, trade and all these tariffs is one thing when you were trying to build this country and protect, and the markets were that. Right now, we've got a global economy and supply chains are so connected, it is really difficult to try to do these tariffs and to make them have the same effect, to keep jobs from going overseas and to build up jobs here. It's just a different world that we got here now. And there's a place for tariffs, there's a place for exceptions, but right now it just does not seem that they know what in the world that they're doing, and that there's no end in sight right now. I'm afraid that we're seeing the new normal with all of these tariffs. That's my biggest fear right now, is that we've seen the new normal, and that nothing's going to get done until the eve of the election, and it's going to be a bad deal. Of course, the president will say it's a good deal, but it's going to be a bad deal. But we'll just kind of see how that goes. The supply chains that we got right now are so connected. There was some fellow the other day in the town hall in Hamilton. He was just pretty angry about the whole Chinese tariff thing too. And he was right. He was so mad about communist China. He's right. People forget it's communist China. And he said, I ain't gonna buy nothing anymore from China. I'm not gonna buy anything. I said, well, good luck with that, sir. You know, you'll be buying things from China, you don't even know them. You know, because there's tarts and there's this, that, and the other. But I have been on my soapbox about tariffs from the very beginning. There's a time and a place. I don't like the way they're doing it. So, all right, I'm getting the wrap-up signal. Let's do one more question. Anybody? Oh, I just overwhelmed you now. Yes, sir. Doc. All right.
Again, we very much appreciate you being here. And what is your opinion about the role of community colleges in training the American workforce?
I think it's going to be potentially one of the most important pieces of that training program that we have in the future. I really do believe that. We're going to have high-tech jobs. We're going to have, you know, the jobs that we're going to require specialties in 4-year and advanced degrees. But we are a manufacturing state. I'm going to talk particularly about Alabama. We're already a manufacturing state, and we can't find the folks to fill the jobs. Everywhere I go with these expansions of the automobile plants, Toyota, Mazda, everyone is worried about getting people on the floor, getting people to get in there to do those things. I think that the community college has an incredible opportunity, more so than at any time in our history, to provide good education, to provide it at a great cost. We can expand Pell Grants, we can do the things to get more students here. We got to do the education to the junior high and high school kids to make sure that they want to come here. Because they can come here and they can get a 2-year degree and they can get it while they work. That's number one. They can get it while they work. They can get a 2-year degree and then go out to a good job and make $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year with benefits. And if they want to go beyond that, they can go beyond that. The world's their oyster at that point. So I think it's going to be really important everywhere we're going. When I talk to businesses and manufacturers, I make sure they know to try to talk to the local community colleges and to try to do whatever we can in partnership. I think more and more businesses are also going to be looking to you guys to partner. It'll help financially for the school. It'll help them. So I just can't say enough about the way the system We've had a rocky road in the junior college in some Alabama, but right now it's on the rise, and I think it's something that we should be very, very proud of. So thank you for that question. That was not a setup, by the way. But I've been disappointed if you didn't ask that question. Folks, it's getting late. I so much appreciate everybody staying. But look, there's so much more that we can talk about. I mean, and if you haven't noticed, I really like these things. I really enjoy talking and listening and hearing folks, the concerns, the single payer issues. And I've had some people who really didn't like me that wanted to talk to me a lot too. So, and that's good. I get this. I enjoy it. Let me say once again, thank you so much for letting us come here and be here today. I've enjoyed coming up here in the Cab Jackson area, in the Rangeville. It's good to see Judge Cole again, and I really mean that. But the most important thing is, thank you for allowing me to be your guest senator. I can't tell you how honored I am. It is a privilege. I'll tell you, there's a lot more about partisanship that goes on in the Senate. I can tell you some really great stories, about a lot of my friends on the other side of the aisle that I really like and respect, and we're doing a lot of things. There's a lot more going on. But where I am in the history every day, when I wake up and I walk on the floor, I still get chill bumps. And it's going to be the same way ever. And it's going to be there for a long time. I promise you, we're going to do what we can because I know that there is something special about what we can do. I know there's something special about public service. I'm not in this for me. I'm in this for you. And I really mean that. And every day when I go sit up there, I'm thinking about you and what I can do and how I can better serve the people in this state. And I love the history part of it. Make no mistake. When I go sit at my desk, when we have a vote on the floor of the Senate sometimes, I just want to sit at my desk and take it all in. And look around the gallery and look around that floor. And I pull out my drawer of my desk that's been there since about 1880. And just about every senator that's ever used it has signed it. When I look at that drawer and I see the signatures of John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman and Ed Muskie and Hubert Humphrey and all of the great senators that have sat at the same desk I have, I got to tell you, folks, it's a kick. It is a rush. It really is. I so much enjoy being there and doing what I'm doing. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. I very, very much appreciate your time.